Welcome back, everybody, to another deep dive with yours truly.
Glad to be back.
So today we're diving into something pretty wild. You're talking about President Trump's return to the White House.
Yeah.
And we're looking at a bunch of news articles that came out just in the past few days.
Fascinating stuff.
It's really something. And let me tell you, it has been a whirlwind of a start to his term.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, he's fired a ton of people from the Biden administration, signed a whole stack of executive orders to reverse a bunch of Biden's policies, and basically made it clear that he's not here to play nice.
Yeah, no kidding.
It feels like a total 180 from the last 4 years, and honestly, I have no idea what's going to happen next. It's a bit unnerving.
Well, I think what strikes me is just the sheer audacity of it all.
Yeah.
It's not like he's just trying to tweak things here and there.
Yeah.
He's aiming for a full system reset.
Yeah.
And he's doing it with this almost theatrical flair.
Oh, yeah.
You know, it's like he's back on The Apprentice or something.
Yeah. Totally. Like, remember how he used to say, "You're fired," all the time?
Right.
Well, guess what? He's brought it back.
Oh, yeah.
And it's almost like he's trying to erase the past 4 years and pretend like he never even left.
That's a good point. It's definitely a power move.
Oh, for sure.
And speaking of power moves, we got to talk about these mass firings.
Right.
Over 1,000 people, that's not just cleaning house. That's like demolition.
It's crazy. I mean, I get that new presidents usually bring in their own people.
Sure.
But this is something else. It's like next level.
Right.
It makes you wonder if he's trying to put loyalists in every position, like regardless of their qualifications.
That's the key question here. Is this about competence or is it about loyalty?
Yeah.
Because if it's the latter, that could have some pretty serious consequences for how the government functions.
Oh, totally. Imagine if you went to the DMV and the person behind the counter had no clue what they were doing.
Right.
Because they only got hired because they were like buddies with the president.
Exactly. It would be chaos.
It would be a complete disaster. And it's not just the sheer number of these firings, it's who he's targeting.
Right.
Like General Mark Milley, who's been pretty critical of Trump in the past.
Very much so.
And even suggests that Trump was like a threat to democracy. Well, guess what?
What?
Milley is out as an advisor on infrastructure.
Well, that sends a pretty chilling message to anyone in government who might even think about disagreeing with the president. It creates this atmosphere of fear and self-censorship, which is so dangerous for a healthy democracy.
Absolutely. And then you've got José Andrés.
Oh, yeah, the chef?
Yeah, the celebrity chef who's done a lot of humanitarian work.
Right.
Well, he and Trump have this history, this kind of feud.
I'd forgot about that.
Stemming from a canceled restaurant deal that turned into a legal battle.
Oh, wow.
So what does Trump do? Boots him from the President's Council on Sports, Fitness, and Nutrition.
Oh, man. That just seems so petty.
It feels personal, right? Like he's settling old scores.
It does seem that way. It really raises questions about his motivations. Yeah. Is he really governing for the good of the country? Or is he just using his power to punish his enemies and reward his friends?
Yeah, it's a big question. And it's something we're going to have to watch very carefully as his term goes on.
Absolutely.
So we've got these mass firings that seem more about loyalty than competence.
Yeah.
What else is going on? Because I know this is just the tip of the iceberg.
Well, let's talk about those executive orders.
Yeah.
He signed a whopping 78 of them in just his first few days in office.
It's 78.
78. And most of them are aimed at undoing things that Biden did.
Oh, wow.
It's like he's trying to wipe the slate clean and start from scratch.
Okay, so 78 executive orders. That's a lot to unpack. Where do we even begin?
Let's start with the big ones. He pulled us out of the Paris Climate Accord, reversed Biden's immigration policies, and revoked protections for transgender troops.
Wow.
It's clear that he's trying to make a statement, to show that he's in charge and he's going to do things his way no matter what.
Yeah, I mean, some of these executive orders are straight out of his 2016 campaign playbook.
Yeah.
Remember all that talk about building a wall and banning Muslims?
Oh, yeah.
Well, it looks like he's actually trying to make good on those promises.
Interesting.
He's declared a national emergency at the border, expanded the categories of people who can be deported, and even wants to end birthright citizenship.
That's a huge one.
It is a big one.
Ending birthright citizenship would be a radical change to the Constitution.
Totally. It would mean that children born in the U.S. to undocumented immigrants would no longer automatically be citizens.
Right.
And that could affect millions of people.
Millions.
It feels like he's trying to redefine what it means to be American.
Yeah.
To create a more exclusive definition based on certain criteria.
Yes, yeah.
But is that even possible? I mean, can he really just change the Constitution with an executive order?
It's highly unlikely that he can do that unilaterally. The Constitution is pretty clear on birthright citizenship, and it would take a lot more than an executive order to change it.
Okay.
But that doesn't mean that he won't try.
Right.
He's shown that he's willing to test the limits of his power before.
Yeah, it's like he's playing a game of chicken with the courts,
Right.
daring them to stop him.
Yeah.
And meanwhile, he's creating a lot of anxiety and uncertainty for people who are already in a vulnerable position.
Exactly. And that's the problem with governing by executive order. It can be a really quick way to make changes.
Yeah.
But it bypasses the legislative process.
Yeah.
And can lead to policies that are poorly thought out or even unconstitutional.
Yeah, for sure. So we've got the mass firings, we've got this flurry of executive orders. What else is on Trump's agenda?
Well, he's also taking aim at the federal workforce.
Okay.
He's ordered all federal employees back to the office full-time.
Oh, wow.
Which is a big deal after so many have been working remotely during the pandemic.
For sure.
And he's also looking to weaken job protections for civil servants.
Oh, that sounds like a recipe for disaster.
Yeah.
I mean, the federal government is already having trouble attracting and retaining talented people.
Right.
If you make it easier to fire people and harder to get a good job, why would anyone want to work there?
That's a really good point. And it raises concerns about his motives as well.
Totally.
Is he actually trying to improve government efficiency? Or is he trying to gut the bureaucracy and make it easier to control?
Yeah.
Because if you have fewer experienced people working in government, it becomes a lot harder to challenge the president's authority.
That's true. So it seems like he's trying to consolidate his power on a lot of different fronts.
Yeah.
He's getting rid of potential critics, stacking the government with loyalists, and using executive orders to bypass Congress. It's a pretty bold strategy, and honestly, it's hard to say how it's all going to play out.
One thing's for sure, it's going to be a wild ride.
Oh, I believe it.
And we'll be here to break it all down for you every step of the way.
Hold on tight, everyone. This is just the beginning.
Indeed. And we haven't even gotten to the massive announcement on infrastructure yet.
Oh, yeah.
That's a whole other can of worms.
We'll dive into that in part 2, so stay tuned.
Sounds good.
So we laid out some of Trump's first moves, like right out of the gate.
Yeah, the initial flurry of activity.
But actions speak louder than words, right?
Yeah.
So how are people reacting to all this?
Well, it's pretty mixed, to say the least.
Yeah.
The articles we've got here paint a really vivid picture, the divide. On one hand, you've got Trump supporters, and they're ecstatic.
Right.
They see this as him finally, delivering on the promises he made back in 2016, draining the swamp, putting America first, all that.
Yeah.
One article even quotes a congressman from Tennessee who said, "Man, did he promise and deliver."
Oh, wow.
And that pretty much sums up the sentiment among his base.
Right. So his base is thrilled. But what about everyone else? I can't imagine the Democrats are exactly happy about all this.
Well, yeah, not exactly.
Yeah.
There's a lot of talk about resisting Trump's agenda, fighting back against what they see as an attack on democracy and basic human rights.
Yeah.
One article even mentions that some prominent news anchors on MSNBC were using words like authoritarianism and coup to describe what's happening.
Wow.
So it's pretty clear that they see Trump as a real threat, and they're not going to back down without a fight.
Okay, so we've got the politicians and the pundits. What about everyday Americans? Are people on the ground freaking out?
Well, there have definitely been protests.
Yeah.
Especially in response to those executive orders on immigration and the environmental regulations.
Right.
People are taking to the streets, voicing their concerns, making it clear that they're not going to just stand by and watch Trump dismantle everything they believe in.
So it sounds like things are getting pretty heated.
Yeah.
I mean, is there any chance of finding common ground here, or are we just headed for a full-blown political war?
That's the big question, isn't it? Right now, it feels like everyone's dug in, ready to fight tooth and nail.
Yeah.
But I think it's important to remember that at the end of the day, we're all Americans. We all want what's best for this country. The challenge is finding a way to bridge that divide and have a real conversation about how to move forward.
I agree. But it's hard to be optimistic when you see how polarized everything has become.
I hear you.
It feels like we're living in two completely different realities.
I understand that feeling, but I do think that dialogue is still possible, even necessary. If we all just retreat to our own corners and yell at each other, nothing's ever going to get done.
That's true. So let's say for the sake of argument that people are willing to talk about him, what are the biggest challenges facing the country right now? What do we need to be focusing on?
One thing that really jumps out at me is this growing distrust in institutions.
Yeah.
People have lost faith in the government, in the media, even in each other. And when you don't trust anyone, it's really hard to have a functioning society.
Yeah, it's a really good point. It feels like everyone's suspicious of everyone else.
Right.
And it's creating this toxic atmosphere where it's impossible to get anything done.
Exactly. And I think that's partly because we've become so isolated from each other.
Right.
We live in these little bubbles, surrounded by people who agree with us, and we never have to actually confront opposing viewpoints.
That's so true, especially on social media.
Oh, absolutely.
You can curate your own feed, so you only see the news and opinions you agree with, which just reinforces your existing biases.
Yeah, it creates this echo chamber effect where everything you hear confirms what you already believe, even if it's not true.
Right. So how do we break out of these echo chambers? How do we even start talking to each other again?
Well, I think it starts with being willing to listen.
Okay.
Not just waiting for your turn to speak, but really hearing what the other person has to say.
Right.
Even if you disagree with them completely.
It's a lot harder than it sounds, though.
It is.
It's easy to get defensive when someone challenges what you believe in.
Oh, yeah.
Especially if you feel like they're attacking your identity.
Sure. But it's important to remember that disagreement doesn't have to be personal. We can have different opinions without hating each other.
I hope you're right. Because it feels like we're headed down a pretty dangerous path here.
Yeah.
If we can't find a way to talk to each other, to understand each other, then I don't see how we can solve any of the problems we're facing as a country.
I agree. It's going to take a lot of effort, a lot of patience, a lot of willingness to compromise.
Yeah.
But I do believe it's possible.
Okay, so let's switch gears a little bit. We've talked about the firings, the executive orders, the public reaction, but there's one big piece of the puzzle that we haven't really explored yet.
Yeah.
And that's that massive announcement on infrastructure that Trump keeps teasing.
Right. That's a big one.
Yeah.
And it's particularly interesting because infrastructure was such a recurring theme during his first term. Remember Infrastructure Week?
Oh, yeah. How can I forget? It became a bit of a running joke.
Well, it seems like he's really trying to make a comeback on that front. But this time he's promising something truly groundbreaking.
Okay.
Something that will make America great again.
All right. I'm intrigued. What's he got up his sleeve?
Well, the details are still pretty sketchy.
Okay.
But from what we can gather from these articles, it seems like he's thinking big, really big. We're talking high-speed rail lines connecting all the major cities, massive renewable energy projects, maybe even a space elevator.
A space elevator? Seriously?
That's what the rumors are saying. It sounds crazy.
I know.
But this Trump we're talking about, he loves that spectacle, that grand gesture.
Okay, so he's promising to build a space elevator. How's he going to pay for all of this? I mean, these projects would cost trillions of dollars.
That's the million-dollar question. And that's where things get a little tricky. Because while he's promising all this spending, the Republicans are also pushing for these massive tax cuts, which would obviously reduce the government's revenue by a lot.
Right, so it's the classic political dilemma, guns or butter, or in this case, tax cuts or space elevators.
Exactly. And it'll be really interesting to see how he tries to square that circle. Will he be willing to raise taxes to fund these infrastructure dreams? Or is he going to try to cut other programs, which would probably lead to a lot of pushback from the Democrats and even some Republicans?
It's a tough spot to be in, for sure. And it really highlights the challenges of governing in a country that's this divided,
Yeah.
It's just hard to get anything done when everyone's fighting over the same shrinking pie.
It's true.
Yeah.
But it's also a reminder that politics is all about choices.
Yeah.
And the choices we make as a society have real consequences for people's lives.
Well said. All right, so I think we've covered a lot of ground here. We've talked about the political landscape, the public reaction, the challenges that the country is facing.
Yeah.
But honestly, it feels like we've only scratched the surface. There's so much more to unpack.
You're right. This is just the beginning of a long and complex story. And we'll be here to help you understand it every step of the way.
So stay tuned for part 3 of our deep dive, where we'll dig even deeper into Trump's infrastructure plans and explore what they could mean for the future of America. Okay, so we talked about the firings, the executive orders, the public reaction,
Right. Yeah,
all that.
And all the big stuff.
But now it's time to tackle the elephant in the room.
Yeah.
This massive announcement on infrastructure.
Right.
That Trump keeps teasing. During his first term, Infrastructure Week became kind of a punchline.
Oh, yeah, it did.
But this time around,
Yeah.
he's promising something truly revolutionary.
I know.
He says it's going to catapult America into the future.
Well, that's the claim.
Yeah.
It's certainly a bold statement.
It is.
And the articles we've got here suggest a pretty fascinating shift in focus.
Oh, yeah.
Remember all those big-ticket projects from his first term?
Like
the wall, the airports, talking about rebuilding roads and bridges.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, this time it seems like he's aiming for something even grander.
Okay.
Something more futuristic.
Uh-huh.
Almost like he's trying to one-up himself, you know.
Interesting. So what exactly is he proposing? Give us the juicy details.
Well, the specifics are still under wraps.
Come on.
But they're whispers of high-speed rail lines crisscrossing the entire country.
Wow.
Massive renewable energy projects that'll supposedly make America energy independent.
Okay.
And get this, maybe even a space elevator.
A space elevator.
Yes, you heard that right. A space elevator.
That sounds like something straight out of science fiction.
It does, doesn't it? But that's the thing about Trump.
Yeah.
He's always been a showman, a master of spectacle.
For sure.
And what could be more spectacular than a giant elevator shooting people into space?
Okay, I gotta admit, it is a pretty captivating idea.
Oh, yeah.
But let's be realistic here. A space elevator, that's gotta be insanely expensive.
Oh, yeah.
Not to mention technologically challenging.
Totally.
I mean, do we even have the know-how to build something like that?
That's a great question.
Yeah.
And honestly, I don't think anybody really knows if a space elevator is even feasible.
Right.
But let's put that aside for a second and focus on the bigger picture.
Yeah.
What's interesting here is the ambition, the sheer scale of Trump's vision.
Mm-hmm.
He's not just talking about, fixing potholes.
Yeah.
He's talking about transforming America into a global superpower in the realm of technology and innovation.
Okay, so it's a compelling narrative.
Yeah.
But narratives don't build bridges or launch rockets. It all comes down to money.
Exactly.
And that's where things get a little tricky.
Yeah.
Because while Trump is promising trillions of dollars in infrastructure spending,
Right.
the Republicans are also pushing for these massive tax cuts, which would obviously reduce the government's revenue.
You've hit the nail on the head. It's like he wants to have his cake and eat it too.
Right.
And it sets up a pretty interesting political battle.
Yeah.
Will he be willing to raise taxes to fund these big infrastructure dreams?
Right.
Or is he going to try to cut other programs?
Yeah.
Which would almost certainly lead to a lot of pushback from Democrats and even some Republicans.
It's a tough choice.
It is.
And I think it really speaks to the broader challenges of governing in such a hyper-partisan environment.
Absolutely.
When everyone's so focused on scoring political points and undermining the other side, it's just hard to find common ground and actually get things done for the American people.
Absolutely. And I think this infrastructure battle could be a defining moment for Trump's second term.
You think so?
I do. If he can pull it off,
Yeah.
if he can somehow manage to find the money for these ambitious projects
Right.
and actually deliver on his promises, it could really solidify his legacy as a builder,
Right.
as a visionary who reshaped America for the 21st century.
Okay. But what if he fails?
Whoa.
What if this just turns into another infrastructure week debacle?
Then it would be a devastating blow to his credibility.
Yeah.
It would prove that he's all talk and no action.
Right. So the stakes are incredibly high.
They are.
And we'll be watching closely to see how it all plays out.
Absolutely.
So there you have it, folks.
A deep dive into the first days of Trump's second term. It's been a wild ride.
We've covered a lot of ground.
We have.
From the mass firings to the executive orders to these ambitious and somewhat outlandish infrastructure plans.
Yeah, you could say that.
But one thing's for sure, this is just the beginning.
Oh, yeah.
The next 4 years are going to be a wild ride.
Buckle up.
And we'll be here to break it all down for you every step of the way.
Every twist and turn.
So stay informed, stay engaged.
Yes.
And most importantly, stay curious.
Couldn't agree more.
Because in these uncertain times, knowledge is power.
Well said.
So we'll leave you to ponder the possibilities.
Yeah.
What will Trump's second term hold?
Who knows?
Only time will tell.
Indeed.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
It's been a pleasure.
Until next time.